right, all right. All right, we're here in Amsterdam. Oh no, I mean Rotterdam. I mean Kortrijk. I mean Utrecht. I mean The Hague. I mean, we're here in Holland. We're going to be media. We're creative. We wear bright orange shirts. We go to design centers. We're creative. We love media. And what's the #1 brand in news on the planet Earth? The New York Times, right? We know when we hear the word New York Times, we think intelligent. We think discourse. We think authority. So we're going to hear from somebody from the New York Times R&D group. And they are doing some killer, kick-ass stuff, APIs, that are trying to push the envelope of what is the future of news. You all are going to be able to meet a guy named Nick Bilton right now. And Nick, by the way, is on leave writing a book, too, on interactive storytelling. So we can figure out how to have multiple endings. She loves me. She loves me not. She loves me. She hates me. Okay, whatever. Interactive storytelling. Nick, come on out.
Thank you, sir. How's it going, everyone? So I work at the New York Times in the Research and Development Labs, and I'm currently on a book leave writing a book about the future of storytelling, technology, media, and the intersection that takes place with that. So I'm going to talk about both of those things. I'll talk a little bit about sensors and just some other random stuff. And I thought I'd start out with a project I recently did, which was a research visualization project. And I wanted to look at the type of people that came to the New York Times and to the website and where they came from. And so I used a software program called Processing, and I pulled in. Can we actually dim the lights for a second, just for this portion? And I pulled in all the IP addresses of where the users were coming to the site. And this is just a snapshot of about 5 minutes or so of users coming to the New York Times. And the little blue dots are mobile traffic, and the yellow dots are regular web traffic. And this is around 9 in the morning on the West Coast, around lunchtime on the East Coast. And this is just a little video animation you can see in real time of users that are actually coming to the website. And so you can see there's a lot more mobile on the West Coast because they're probably going to work, commuting, things like that. And this became a really interesting project. And then I started to look at Europe and the rest of the world. And I wanted to understand who was coming to the site. And this is a video animation of that. And you can see in Europe, we can't really zoom in on this, otherwise I would zoom into Rotterdam. But you know, in Asia and Japan and everything, you have a lot of mobile content, a lot of mobile people coming to the website, and then it's a lot more web-based in Europe and North and South America. So this is the book that I'm working on right now. It's called Bite Snack Meal. It's going to be published by Random House in May of this year. And I'm going over a few different things within the book. I'm looking at the concept of convergence, of content, of news, of how our brains work differently when we're online, when we're on the web. This is just a few components to it that I'll walk you through. This was a study that was done at UCLA by Gary Small, and what he did was he took people and he put them in an fMRI scanner, and he scanned their brain when they were reading a book, and he scanned their brain when they were online. And you can see that there's tremendous amounts more activity happening when you're online. It's a much different experience. It's cognitive. I'm using a mouse. I'm making decisions. I have all these colors and these different experiences that I have to navigate. So it's not just about going from print to web or print to mobile. It's a cognitive different experience. So I hear a lot of questions all the time about, is long-form content dying? Is our language dying? Are newspapers dying? And I started to think about, well, if that's the case, what happened when the telephone came out or the television? Did we ask those questions then too? So I went back in time in the New York Times archives, and I looked up the first time the telephone was talked about. And it was March 22nd, 1876. And there's a brief description about what this telephone is, and then it jumps into saying, but this new telephone, by coming into our lives, into society, is going to empty the concert halls, and people will never leave their house again. And I thought, okay, well, that didn't really happen. So about a year later, 1877, there's this thing called the phonograph that came out. And opening sentence is, the telephone that was just regarded as this ingenious invention of the century is about to completely be eclipsed by the phonograph. And what do you know? People will never leave their house again. They'll buy music in quart bottles, and they'll never go to concert halls and so on. And if you follow this through history, this is the same exact thing every time there's a new invention that comes along. They say this about the old invention. So it's not the end of the world. It's just a transition that we're going through, and it's a new form of storytelling. So speaking of storytelling, I teach at NYU, New York University, and I teach a class called 1-2-10. And what it signifies is about designing interaction for the 1 foot, which is the telephone mobile experience. So that's at the distance from your face. The 2 foot, which is your computer and how far that is from your face. And then the 10 foot, which is the television and how far that is. I teach about how you design interaction for these different courses. And one of the things that I really try to make my students understand is it's all just storytelling. Whether you're writing a book or a TV show or an ad campaign or whatever it is, you're telling a story. A good user interface is a good story. A good news article is a good story. But one of the problems that's happened now is that everyone's become a storyteller. With the mobile device that I have in my pocket, I can tell stories just as equally as the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and so on. And because of that, we have essentially information overload. Every time I go online, I'm faced with a new startup, a new social network, something new to join that I have to be a part of. And there's all this new information. And we've essentially become like these nomads trying to find a shelter from this blizzard of information that's just constantly bombarding us. And so I said, well, how much content do we actually see on a daily basis? And I wrote a little script that went through and looked at the top 100 news websites in the US. And it just took one page, the front page of these sites, and it said, how many links do you see on these sites? So if I go to Huffington Post today, just going to the front page, I'll see 720 links. If I go in, that's going to double and so on. If I go to the New York Times, it's 427. If I start to go to these meme sites, it goes up into the thousands. So I took my browser history from a week, added it up, and then divided it by 7 to make it a day. And it turns out that I see 200 to 300 web pages a day, which equals about 490,000 words, which is also about 100 to 160,000 links in a single day. War and Peace was only 460,000 words, so that's a lot of information. And so we have this information overload that we're going through. And we're forced to figure out how to cull this information ourselves. And what's happening is we're using our social networks to do that, right? We're using these things that were originally designed to add friends and follow people to see what hamburger they were eating today. And we've developed this swarm intelligence to say, how can I get the content to come towards me? And that's something that I'm really going to dive into more in the book. The other thing that I hear all the time is that our language is dying, that kids these days just don't read. And there's study after study that shows that they do read. But we hear these concerns that they speak in this LOL speak. They say LOL and BRB and TMI and all these different things, and that it's ruining our culture and our language, which is not true. The thing is with IM and SMS and these acronyms that we speak with, it's the first time in history we've ever had to speak in real time with words. So I say LOL because I've never had to tell someone I'm laughing at you. If I'm in person with them, I laugh, right? If I'm on the phone, I laugh. But when you start to type these things, you have to communicate that. I say BRB because I'll be right back, because they don't know if I walk away from my screen. And so we're developing this new form of communication, and it just so happens that it's going into this short form way. Acronyms have been around forever. They've never ruined society. They've never ruined our language because of that. The word OK, which every language uses, comes from all correct, which became abbreviated in the 1800s. Technology, computers, medical, all of these things have brought acronyms into our lives, and they haven't destroyed our language or made us read less. They're just new forms of communication. So I'll walk you through a little bit about what we're doing in the Times Research and Development Group. The group is split up into 3 different groups. There's the core research and development group, emerging platforms and analytics. So what the analytics teams do is they do the multivariate testing on the website. So if we want to try a new ad campaign or a new line to try to get somebody to sign up for something, we can take 30 different versions of that, present them to the user, and then the user can then we present all these different versions. So one group will get one version, the other group will get another, and we see in real time what's working, and then the system starts to test itself until it figures out what the best solution is. The emerging platform group really works on mobile, on video, on prototypes. And then the core research group, where I am, we investigate new devices and applications and things. So just to walk you through some of the research and development projects that we're doing, One is called Newspaper 2.0, which is, of course, what's the next generation of newspaper. And we talk a lot about paper is just a device. It's a digital device or it's an actual tangible device, but it's just a device. And when we move to these new platforms, we have to understand how we tell stories on them. So we've worked with the Kindle, and we've worked with other companies. This is called the Booking. I'm not sure if it's out in Europe. And what we've been trying to do is say, well, what happens to our content when you put them on these e-reader experiences? This was a series that we worked on. It was a year-long, 100,000-word reporting series. And this was actually resubmitted and redistributed for this reader device. We work with other manufacturers, and what we've really been looking at now is flexible displays, because everyone keeps asking about that. This is something we have in the lab. This is just an e-ink flexible display, and you can see that it's fully working. The reason that the entire device isn't flexible is because of those batteries, but there's new technology that came out this year where transistors are now flexible, and you can actually you'll start to see flexible devices in the next 2 to 3 years. This is something, I believe it's in Italy now, which is supposed to be a mobile phone flexible display thing. I'm not sure where that's going. This is from the e-ink R&D labs, looking at the next generation of flexible devices. And then there's other technologies we've been looking at. Philips is working on this color screen, which is going to be also flexible, but also full color e-ink, so low battery power, low cost. These screens cost over like $22 or something like that, and that's now, if you imagine where that's going to be in 5 years, it's going to be pretty minimal. And then another technology is OLED, and this is OLED from Sony, and it stands for Organic Light Emitting Diode. And the way these work is they're just like the LEDs that you have in your computer monitor, but because they're organic, they're actually flexible. And they're incredibly expensive to make, but once you've made them, they last for a very long time, so that's very promising. And then last, this is from the ASU Flexible Display Lab, which is a lab in Arizona that's paid for by the US government. And they're constantly looking at how they can make devices that are super inexpensive, that people can take on the battlefield. This was just from Forrester that I threw in here this morning, but this is a projection of where these e-reader devices will be in the next few years, and when color and full-frame video and the price points will come down. And so it's very nascent right now. It's the very beginning of the technology, but it's definitely coming. We're also looking at these business models that associate with that. The other problem that we see happening in the lab, and I'm sure you're all aware of this, is that everyone has a different size display. If I took a poll in this room right now, I'm sure there'd probably be about 50 different size cell phone displays, probably be about 20 different size laptops. And so we have to figure out how to make experiences that format to those different sizes. So we worked with Adobe to do this project called the Times Reader, and it reformats and relays itself out no matter what device you're on. If you're on a mobile device that's 4 inches wide or a 52-inch plasma in your home, it reformats and relays itself out accordingly. And it's been really important for us to understand this to be able to deliver the best experience possible for that. And this is the layout. The other thing we get to do is we get to use the typography, we get to use the multimedia and the full interactive graphics in these smaller and larger experiences. We're also looking a lot at mobile, of course. This was the first mobile phone. We've come a long way since then. I'm not sure if this guy has, though. This is just some of the phones we have in the lab, and we test what our content looks like and how it interacts on there. And then we prototype different mobile experiences. So this was just a prototype we put together, but it's a real estate app. And what it does is it says, okay, we know where you are. Tell us what your price range is, and we'll tell you apartments in the area for rent or homes for sale or something like that. So we can build a much better experience for the user by doing something like this. We've also been looking at how we can help people move content between that 1 to 10 experience without having to do it themselves. And this was a project that we worked on about a year ago. We got a patent for. What we did was we took a cell phone, we put an RFID chip in that phone, and then we put an RFID reader up to the computer. And the RFID is the thing that gets you in the building when you swipe your card in the morning. And so we knew, based on if your phone was down at your desk, we knew you were there. You didn't have to tell your computer I was here, I just knew. And whatever you were doing on your computer, when you pick up your phone and walk away, it would send that content to your phone. So if you were halfway through a New York Times article and you picked up your phone, it would then put the other half of the, we know you're halfway down the page, it would put the other half of the article on your phone and you automatically start reading it. And if you're out and about and there's a restaurant you want to check out or something like that, or there's an article you want to read when you get back, you tag it, you come back, you put your phone down, and off it goes and gets that content for you. And so we've been looking at how you could do that. Your mobile device becomes the central hub for how you communicate with the other content in your life. And this can even go to the television. Another concept that we've been pushing quite a bit, and I'm going to be writing about in my book too, is this idea called smart content. So if you get a newspaper delivered in the morning, it's essentially dumb content. The content's intelligent, but what you get is exactly the same as the person that lives next to you, who's exactly the same as the person that lives next to them. There's no difference in the content. If I'm not interested in the sports section, I still get it. So what smart content does is it says, okay, we understand what you're interested in and what you're not interested in, and we'll deliver that associated content for that. So here's a perfect example. Imagine if I'm on the New York Times and I click on this story, and it's about the Iraq vote. And I go through and I read the story. When I get to my mobile phone right now, I see that story. But if I've already read it and there hasn't been updates, it should automatically go away so I don't have to waste my time navigating through more content. And that gets back to this idea of how do we deal with the information overload. We build better filters and better content to do that. This brings up the question of what does ubiquitous computing mean for publishers? You have the question of what kind of content you deliver to these different devices, and if you're being smart about it, how do you know if I want to see video, if I want to see text? And so you have to try to take all these different experiences and you say, I know where you are, I know what device you're on, I know what you've seen already, let me try to deliver the best experience for that. And another example of this smart content, actually, we mocked up as a print experience too. And so this was what we call the Custom Times, and it's a newspaper box, and you can walk up to it, and it's got all these sensors and these different devices in it, and you could say, I want local news from where I am, and then it knows where you are because it knows where the box is. And you could say, I want more text and more headlines. You could swipe your card, you could swipe your phone, you could do anything to get that information that says, oh, we know who you are, Nick. You don't like reading sports and opinion, but here's New York, science, health, and technology. And then there's the marketing aspect of it is because of we know where you are, this is just an ad that we threw together that says, hey, Starbucks we have access to Starbucks' API. They just brewed a nice pot of coffee around the corner. You could go there to read your custom New York Times. And we really followed this through and started integrating some of these things into the newspaper. We started to put SMS into the newspaper so you could interact with it, which may not seem like a big deal in Europe, but in America it's taken quite a while to do that. We're starting to look at adding mobile video into the paper so you can use semicodes to take pictures of the semicode and navigate it. This is actually a mock-up from the print paper. One of the problems is that we have a higher age demographics, so it's tough to try to tell them that this is semicode and not a crossword puzzle missing the numbers. So it took a little explaining. And then we're also looking at the living room. The television is going to be a big component of how we consume content on the internet. All the next generation of TVs are all going to be web-enabled devices. Right now the problem is how do you navigate them and how does the content look? And of course the content doesn't really work unless you can go to YouTube and go full screen, but you still have to navigate that content. And so we've been looking at different devices in the living room, like there's these wireless mice, I don't even know what you call them, wireless mouses, and you can navigate just in the air, almost like Minority Report. And then we're also looking at the mobile device, right? So my mobile phone, if it knows I'm in my living room, and it knows I'm on the New York Times, and it knows I'm on the New York Times on my phone, it can become a remote for my New York Times experience. So we have these prototypes where you can say, play this video, or let me see this article or this slideshow. We also looked at it with tablet PCs and things like that. And so you can drag the content to the television, to your phone, or to the car. And so maybe you get in the car and it can read the article to you when you get in there. And this is just an example of the content being played on the television from the New York Times, all through the web. We also started to look at augmented reality a little bit, which is the new hot topic in Silicon Valley. And we're just exploring the concept of what that could be for advertising. Could it be a better real estate experience? Could it be an example where there's a movie ad in the paper, you could hold up your phone and you could actually see the movie ad in 3D or something like that. And so we're just starting to look at that and explore those concepts. Another thing that I talk about a lot is sensors. So sensors are everywhere. They're in all of our devices. My cell phone has 100 in them. My television has 100. My computer, God knows how many it has. And they can become ways to tell stories and to help filter stories. So a sensor can be an editor, right? If I pull out my mobile phone and I have access to the GPS, I could give content to the reader based on where they're located. If I pull out my mobile phone and the cell towers networks in my phone says, hey, you're moving at 60 miles an hour between cell towers, you're probably in a car, and we can give you the option to listen to the article being read to you. So sensors can really help edit and filter content too. They can also be reporters, right? These are just a couple of basic examples, but we do a lot of these quality of life stories in New York because it's not a very good quality of life. This is a story about potholes in the city. So we talked about this idea of, well, wouldn't it be great if you could put little accelerometers on every cab in the city and a little Wi-Fi thing, and it could collect all the data of all the potholes and all the quality of the roads, and then upload that, and you can get real-time maps, real-time data visualization maps of driving conditions in New York. You could do the same thing for noise levels. You could get real-time maps of noise levels and noise pollution and light pollution in the city, and it could be helpful when you're picking a place to live. It could be helpful if you're navigating a neighborhood. And these are just a couple of examples of how sensors can help deliver these kinds of stories. We talked a lot about real estate because it's a really interesting area for advertising, but a lot of new buildings are starting to put more sensors in. And so we talked about, well, what if you could get access to these different sensors within these buildings and help give users a better experience for that. And then there's sensors as control, right? As sensors as a way to control what you see and how you see it. And this is this digital living room that we have mocked up at the Times. It doesn't look like a cartoon. I just forgot to take a picture of it. But it's got all these screens on the wall, and there's different kinds of content and experiences being sent to you. If I walk in the room, my phone tells the devices that I'm in the room, and I see my personal Flickr account, I see my personal email, Twitter, all these different experiences. And then the television pulls up the videos that I've tagged throughout the day. And then we started talking about, well, what's other ways that we can tell if you're in the room? So we put a stretch sensor in the couch, and we said, okay, you could tell someone's sitting down, and then you could figure out who they are. And then we started looking at how you could change the user interface within that experience. So this is just a device that we put together, and it's got a rangefinder in it which detects how close somebody is to something. And we put this up to the TV. We put the New York Times content on the TV, and based on how close you are, the layout changes and the fonts change. So if I get really close, it gets much smaller. If I get further away, it gets much bigger and shows me more video options and things like that. So just to wrap up here a little bit, we're hearing a lot about real time and how important real time is, and immediacy, I think, is going to be tremendously important for the next generation. And to illustrate that, I'm going to introduce my nephew, Luca. He's 4 years old. This is him sneezing while eating a lollipop. But he has a little digital camera, and he plays with this digital camera all the time. He's obsessed with it. He takes pictures. He has done for the past year or so. And I went out to LA to visit him, and I had an old film camera. And he was like, Uncle Nicky, I want to see the photos. And I said, you can't. It's a film camera. And he looked at me like he had no concept of what I was talking about. For him, he's grown up with this digital camera where he can take pictures and get access to content in seconds. And that's all he knows. He goes online, he watches his Wall-E, he plays on his mom's laptop on all these games online. And this is the life that he's growing up with. And so this next generation, we say they're omnivorous and opportunistic. They expect immediacy, they expect multimedia, and this is some of the stuff that we're doing at the Times to really try to deliver that. This is we started embedding videos on the homepage. We have these fully immersive interactive graphics that people can become a part of. This was an example that came from the newsroom where during the election, people were allowed to say what they were thinking, and these little thought bubbles would appear, and you could hear these interactive experiences based on that. Another example of user-generated content that the next generation almost demands was a way for people to upload photos from Inauguration Day, and there was this really beautiful tile experience that took place. And then last but not least, this is an interactive map that we did. And so we're really starting to think about a lot more about these interactive experiences. And when you look at it, when you go from paper to web to mobile and all these things, it's all just storytelling, and that's what we're doing. Thank you.
Wow. Speaking of a story, so to me your presentation is a very clear story.
Yes.
Of the future of the New York Times.
I hope so.
Right? And so, but yet, the intrigue of the story is not about you folks in the labs, but what goes on in the executive suites. And these guys who have to make a trade-off between being in the dead tree business and this incredible media stuff that you're doing.
Yep.
And I've written publicly about it and spoken often about the idea of the New York Times being much greater than it is today. And we were talking last night about the revenues of the New York Times and how you're afraid that the bosses don't understand that they might have to be the same company with less revenues. And especially after the story you just told, I see the New York Times revenues doubling because of all the incredible leadership and the vision that you guys have.
Yep.
Right? So talk to me a little bit about how you reconcile that here you go to this building, and it's a digital building, by the way. They call
Yep.
it the digital building. But yet, fundamentally, New York Times is still seen as a newspaper, and that's an old model and an old media. But yet here you are inventing this future media.
Well, I mean, there's still 1 million people that buy the print newspaper every day. There's still, on weekends, 1.6 million people that buy the print newspaper. And it's a great experience for them. And so what we're doing is looking at the other users that we have online and saying, how can we build experiences for that? And that happens within nytimes.com. Folks like Derek Gottfried, who did our API and Times People, are really helping bring community and really helping push the New York Times out into the rest of the world. And in the research lab, we're saying, okay, what can we help them with 2 to 5 to 10 years from now? And we're working with advertisers and working with these different content companies and devices and trying to solve those problems. But with the people that buy the print paper, part of the idea of this customization and semicodes and SMS codes was to really try to say, how can we help show these people that there are also alternatives on our mobile devices and things like that. So it's making the paper more interactive.
Okay, but that's still news.
Yep.
All the news that's fit to print.
Yep.
Okay, 1 million people a day, 1.6 on the weekends, right?
Mm-hmm.
All those dots on that screen were a lot more than 1 million people.
There's about 20 million uniques a
right,
month.
And then clearly, news is only a subset of all knowledge. And when you start talking about things like persistent knowledge, that once it's up in the cloud, it's there forever. Structured information, open platforms, leadership. All these are things that you guys are on the cusp of being, if not the #1, certainly in the top 5 on the planet Earth, which means that your potential market is much larger. But I was saying, as I was introducing you to, is that when I think New York Times, I think intelligent people. And that's way more than just news.
Yep.
That's all knowledge and information. So to me, the potential, what's happening here, and the groundwork that you guys are laying down in the labs, if you combine what your brand is today with all the stuff you're doing, and to continue to move forward in a leadership way, and to create a community of people who then who are loyal to you, even if it's in Dutch, but it's the New York Times Dutch edition, and you're creating a community of people that's much greater than just reading the newspaper.
Yep.
Right?
Without a doubt.
I mean, I find that incredibly exciting. I don't see how you can keep a straight face. I mean,
no,
if I worked for your job, I'd be like jumping out of my pants. You know? I mean, it's just incredible what you must see.
No, it's great. We have an amazing opportunity to really explore where the future is going to be, and that was only 1% of some of the prototypes we built, and there's a lot of stuff that we've done a lot of work with advertisers trying to figure out how we can make the experience more of a story. I think it's, people get really upset and very frustrated with the news and newspapers and news companies because they think that they're coming to an end. And it's not. It's a transition. It's exciting. It's the fact that we may be able to to give people flexible displays in 10 years and that have moving images and graphics and things, like, what's bad about that?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Now, so you guys are still a public company?
Yep.
You can buy your stock?
If I had money.
I always talk about how you want to short a stock if this company's like going out of business, like Adobe. But for this company, I would buy this stock. I would long this stock. This is a company that's going to have a great future.
Can I get some money to buy some?
Not a problem. All right. Thank you very much.